Hey y'all, this video or this reading is going to be a little bit different than what I typically do. Um, I'm not sure what I'm going to title it yet. I guess that'll kind of come as the reading or whatever this ends up being progresses. It's not going to be geared towards any specific zodiac sign because I feel, well, first off, my schedule is changing up a little bit. I'm getting back into the medical field again, so um, it's going to be a little bit different for me to be able to find time to do readings. So, in terms of sustainability for this channel, I think it would be best for me to steer away from the 12 zodiac sign videos and instead put out readings on an as available basis, like as I have the free time to sit down and get the readings done and kind of just send them out into the interwebs and allow whoever it resonates with to connect with it. Obviously whoever comes across it at that particular time. So I guess this is like an experiment into that. It's also going to be a little bit different just by nature of the energy that I'm connecting with today. As I'm recording this, it's what's the date? It's the 23rd of October, and right now the moon is, I think, about 2 or 3 degrees at most away from conjoining with Mars. In the constellation of what the West calls Gemini, Castor and Pollux, and what's actually set the tone for the energy of the day for me today is I woke up around 2 or 3 in the morning from really vivid and they're like violent dreams. I'm not going to get into specifics so much, but it was like capsules full of people, and we were like trying to survive this deluge that was guiding all these capsules full of people into these sewers or these underground rivers, and there was a lot of anxiety and fear. And I woke up at one point, and as I was waking up in that liminal state between consciousness, my eyes were like fluttering open and looking over at my wall, which was being illuminated by reflected moonlight, and I was seeing a man with a golden, sinister glint in his eye, and he was smoking a pipe, like watching these people being washed down into these subterranean, watery caverns. And it was all part of his plan. And I don't know, there's just something really sinister and evil about it. And so I woke up with my heart kind of pounding, and I was feeling pretty anxious, and I don't normally feel the need to get up out of bed when I awaken from dreams like that, but I did at this particular point. And so I got up and I came over to my window. Now my window is almost perfectly oriented east. There is another house with a roof that kind of blocks my view of the horizon, but I do get to see a good segment of the eastern sky if I go up next to the window and look up. And like immediately, obviously the moonlight was streaming in through the window. We have the 7th phase of the moon right now, the waxing or the waning half of the cycle. So it's almost a half moon, which would be the 8th phase. But it was situated in this position, like triangulating between Castor, Pollux, and Mars. And I was already in like a heightened anxious state, and like seeing that and then seeing the other bright stars that were also very prevalent above the roof of this house that's over here, it almost made me more anxious. Like something about the sign that it was communicating I didn't like intuitively. And the way it kind of showed up, so it almost looked like a hand to me, like fingers on a hand. Like you had Castor up here, Pollux down here, and then Mars right here, and the moon was like situated right here, and it was like this perfect, weird, like almost bow shape, or like a triangle. And it kind of confused me at first because I'm like still in a half awake, half asleep state, just standing there looking out my window at the stars, and I wasn't sure what I was looking at, and I was trying to do like mental calculations to remember where the moon was in relation to the stars, and then I had to like think like, oh yeah, where's the sun right now? Like late degrees Libra, early degrees Scorpio, already in Scorpio, so I was like extrapolating out from there, like okay, almost half moon of the waning cycle, and trying to figure all that out, and then I couldn't do it in that state of mind, and I was like, what am I looking at right now? What stars are these? Is that? And then it kind of dawned on me. Okay, Castor, Pollux, that's Mars, a little reddish glow. Um, and then I laid in bed after that, like contemplating what I had just seen and trying to figure out what it meant, because it felt very much like there was something significant being communicated by my view of that particular segment of the sky. Um, and obviously, it's more pronounced because of the fact that there is another house blocking most of my view of the rest of the sky. And it was like just this particular segment that I could see. And it was like, this is all that you need to see. And I was trying to connect with the Vedic idea behind the constellation of Castor and Pollux. It's Punarvasu, which is like the re-becoming. Like there's a notion of like a cyclical death and rebirth. It follows the constellation of Ardra, which is Rudra's star. It's very almost cataclysmic there. But then you go into Punarvasu, and it's like this promise of being reborn again, this promise of re-becoming. The constellation is associated with Aditi, which is the goddess, the divine mother, from which all of the gods are birthed. Like this incalculable manifest truth is what this mother is. And the two stars are supposed to be Aditi and Martanda, which is the eighth Aditya, the eighth of the Vedic sons of Aditi, which include Varuna, Angsha, Indra, among others. But Martanda was the last one, and what his name means is like someone who, or like an egg that, or an embryo, an infant that was born dead or like immature, not fully born, and it's supposed to refer to the sun as it's like dipping below the horizon. Like you get that kind of almost egg yolk appearance of the sun right as it's like right there on the horizon. It's like this golden blob, and it's kind of just like melting out of existence, like the light is fading and dimming. But inherent in that imagery is, of course, the knowledge that it's going to rise again, and it's going to look the same coming back up on the eastern horizon. But everything in nature is cyclical. There's death and rebirth. There's dusk, night, dawn, day, dusk, night, dawn, day. This whole constant recycling of light, of existence, of energy. And I was really trying to figure out like what this co-presence of the moon with Mars there and these particular stars was trying to communicate, because obviously in my kind of heightened state of anxiety, it was bad omen, like there was something negative about this. It was portraying something negative. So I think what I want to focus on for today is to do a tarot spread that kind of elaborates on what I was connecting with, that my rational mind hasn't been able to grasp, but I feel like I felt the truth behind it. So I'm going to show you, well, I guess you're going to be present for this portion of the reading, which is when I use these 3 coins that I've dedicated to the oracle to cast an I Ching hexagram, from the ground up. I have a nice little blank slip of paper here. We'll cast that. We'll read from I Ching the Oracle by Benabel Wen, which actually, excuse me for one moment. All right, all is good. Got the book. Okay, so I've got that. I've got the Thoth deck right here. We'll shuffle those up and we'll get those spread out and we'll see what comes through. Obviously, this is going to be relatively impersonal reading. I don't think it's... The message that I was connecting with didn't really feel like it had anything specifically to do with me, but it affected me, if that makes sense. So maybe this reading can be considered like a collective reading. I don't know what's going to come through, so we'll see how things want to be quantified. Okay. Interesting. Hearing like noises in the house, like somebody else is in here. Not entirely surprising. Okay. All right, so we have 2 tails, 1 head. That is a yin line. If I can get that out. I don't think I'll get the marker out and draw that in, so you're probably not going to be able to see this very well, but first line is a yin line. Two heads, 1 tail. That is a yang line, so unbroken line. As our second line, I don't know why I have the glare, you can't even see it. Unbroken yang line with 2 heads, 1 tail. So first trigram we have wind. Two heads, 1 tail, so another yang line. I'm looking at this right now and I'm like seeing aurora in the sky. Like these are like the hills. This yin line at the bottom are the hills. And then you have the air, the atmosphere, the heavens. And I'm seeing them as like ripples in aurora. Little thing. All right, so we have 3 tails. We have a changing yin line. Or a transforming yin line. And that is line 5. Which is actually the head of the hexagram. Another 3 tails, so another changing yin line or transforming yin line. And that is our 6th line. Okay. And with that, our top trigram is thunder. So thunder over wind, which is hexagram number 42 inverted. I don't remember the number of this particular hexagram, but that's what the book is for, right? Okay. So let's see. Bottom trigram is wind, so right here, top trigram, thunder, is 32, the eternal. Okay, so we're going to go flip over to where that is in the Book of Changes. Okay. Hang the eternal. Let's see. The oracle says You are being tasked to handle more than you should be responsible for. The action to take is to endure, and the way to endure is to change. Within you, the sage, you must pursue a constant state of transformation and change, though your outward demeanor should be one of conviction, firmness, and resolve. Be mindful. As you change, you may be tempted to call others to change. You cannot force another's transformation. That is oppressive. You can only compel your own transformation. That is how you will endure. Seek alliance with those most different from you and find harmony. That is how you ensure your longevity and endurance. Favorable for a journey. She goes in to talk about how hexagram 32 continues the narrative from hexagram 31 and kind of discusses love and romance. Since this reading is more geared towards figuring out what the whole message that was coming through in the middle of the night last night for me was, I don't think this is necessarily relevant, but it is talking about courtship, unity of some kind, just a form of like mutual correspondence between the two, because they're both associated with the element of wood, both wind and thunder, the Chinese element of wood. I don't want to get too much into that. Let's see. The sage stands firm and resolute, steadfast, and not wavering in the way. Not wavering in the way means yielding to a constant state of change. That is endurance. An auspicious omen, there is no blame. It is advantageous to proceed. Journeys and undertakings will yield fortuitous gains. Endurance is the power to bear hardship with dignity and prosperity with humility. Hexagram 32 expresses hard work. To endure, you have to persist. Persistence is exhausting. What you seek to maintain can be accomplished, but only with highly demanding energy. The hexagram can also refer to an ascent to leadership, governance, and the role of the leader in relation to subjects. In both the received order of the hexagrams, King Wen's, which is the present order, and the Mawangdui order, Heng is the midpoint, numbered 32. So you have 64 hexagrams, 32 is right in the middle. While the general theme of hexagram 32 is that of endurance, the name of the hexagram is the Eternal, to underscore the shamanic origins of the Book of Changes. The doctrine of the Eternal is a principal concept in the I Ching, and the shamanic cultures of both the Shang and the Zhao. Lao Tzu expressed the void and emptiness of the Tao as the eternal Heng Dao, and to be the eternal is to attain eternal virtue, Heng De. The Tao is the eternal name, Heng Ming, and yet eternally without name, Dao Heng Wu Ming. The doctrine of the eternal as the Tao is to express enduring change, the continuance of change. The eternal is a process of transformation, and the core message is this: to achieve immortality, to transcend and be divine, is to never cease with one's cultivation. Right off the bat, as I'm thinking about this and trying to find correspondence within the dream that I had and the view that I had upon awakening, I'm thinking about the moon connecting with Mars. I mean, inherent in that position in the sky was the sense of coming together, of union, conjunction between the moon and Mars, which will be happening at some point after I finish this reading today. But it's like Mars incites change and movement and action, and it's also often violent and aggressive about it, and how it manifests that change and movement, because Mars is kind of like the principle of sometimes uninhibited, I heard blasphemous, uninhibited energy, just like powering through, blazing through, pushing through. And the highest form of that is obviously Mars in Capricorn, where that energy is contained and it's stretched out and made to endure over long periods of time. It starts the thing, just like Mars does in its Aries expression. It begins the thing, it initiates the idea, it starts the project, and it has that passion and that drive that that blossoms into the beginning of something. But Aries, undeveloped Aries, they're good at starting things. They're not necessarily good at following through and keeping up with it over time. So that's where the crystallization of the best expression of Mars comes through in Capricorn, because then that energy, like I was saying, stretches out and sees the thing through to completion. It finishes the construction of the building, so to speak, whereas Mars in Aries is like, okay, I'm going to swing this pickaxe at the ground and break ground for the foundation of this building, this elaborate building I have in my mind to be laid right here where I'm breaking ground. And then it does that for a few hours, and then it moves on to something else. And then what? Somebody else going to take over the project for you? Sometimes, but more often than not, no. And so that kind of just withers away until Aries feels excited and interested in this project again. But kind of what I was considering, especially with the Vedic stories behind the stars of Castor and Pollux, Punarvasu, like I was saying, and this idea of the dying sun. On the equinox, I was actually walking on the beach, and I was able to watch the sunset on the equinox, which was beautiful, but also really kind of solemn in a way, because it does feel like a death. At that point, the days are being overtaken by the night. And to me, it kind of communicates the sense of empire. I mean, I don't want to get into specifics, but I know most of us have this sense of systemic collapse kind of pervading through every aspect of our lives right now, and pretty much every corner of the world, I think. The age of I don't necessarily want to say open communication, because there's a lot of attempts to censor that all over the place, but we have so much information that is made available to us because of this innovation of the internet. There's so much opportunity for people to learn about things that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to know about, and to really empathize with people who are existing in circumstances that are completely antithetical to your own. And so the collective human consciousness has been very much blown apart and blown open, and I feel like the implications of what that means for us as a society are only just beginning. I mean, the internet hasn't been around that long. I don't know how old most of you guys are. I remember living in the world before the internet was a thing. I mean, I'm not super old, but I was around when dial-up was still a thing, and so nobody really used the internet for much, because talking on the phone was more interesting. And you're not going to get off the phone just so you can get on the internet and search the web for who knows what. Anyway, it's just, I and probably a lot of you have had the opportunity to watch the world metamorphosize into what it is at the present. And right now, I feel like it isn't done. It almost feels like the night overcoming the day. We're still in that process of transitioning. If we think of the dawning of the internet as an equinoctial point of some kind, it's sort of like the former age in its decline, in its breakdown, is slowly diffusing into this new age that's kind of coming in. And with that comes the breakdown of the systems of governance, the systems of facility, of resource management, of economy, of, everything is being affected by this. And I think it was interesting that upon awakening in that liminal state, the image that I got in my mind was of, making eye contact with this evil man smoking a pipe, watching all these people suffering. And I felt like angry at this figure. Like there's something terrifying about him, but I was also angry enough to not care that I was afraid of him. Like I was almost daring him to do something, but he just sat there, kept smoking his pipe, and was just looking, just watching, making eye contact. It's just like almost like this sense of like he was the one who called in the order to have all these people loaded into these weird capsules that we were in, being thrust down into the sewers of the earth. And I can kind of almost metaphorically connect with that image with regards to everything that's happening in the world right now. Like it does very much feel like that, like we're being shoved into the underworld in some form. But there's also this sense of like strength in numbers. I think there are more of us alive on this planet who want to live in a world where information is freely available, where ideas are, unimpeded in their expression, and people are well educated, empathetic, compassionate, and willing to do their part to make sure that the entirety of humanity is sustained in a healthy way that also takes into consideration the environment and the world around us and all the different beings that we share the planet with. I don't want to get so much into that, so I think I'll leave that there. But it was very much like this, me looking up at the constellation with Mars and the moon right there, had the same energy of like watching the sun dip below the horizon on the equinox. It was like watching the empire fade away, watching the former age fade away, and then like the conjunction of the moon with Mars is like representative of like that initiating spark that pushes and propels and ignites things into the next motion, into the next chapter, the next book even, or the next series. I feel like it's a totally different paradigm than what was before, so I think maybe the next series is probably the more accurate portrayal. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much to unpack. Like there's been a lot coming through, and I feel like it's been trying to peek through in all the different zodiacal readings that I've been doing over the last few months. And it's like every single sign gets a different fragment of the reading, and a lot of the times I end up finishing a series of readings thinking to myself how much more beneficial it would have been to maybe have a cohesive message that was not fragmented by signs. Because I mean, you get a particular signs reading and you think, oh, this is the only one that's maybe potentially relevant to me, so I'm just going to watch this one video and maybe another one for cross-watching or another placement in your chart sort of thing. But it's like you're chopping up the message, and I feel like it's the same message that's coming through for all these different signs. It's just they're each getting like different pieces of it. So this is also another reason why I want to move into a different method of providing these readings out here, because I feel like there's less chance for the fragmentation of the overall communication of the energy that I'm connecting with to happen. Hopefully that made sense. It made sense in my head. But yeah, I want to read for the two changing lines. We'll do line 5 and line 6 for this hexagram, and then we'll move into the tarot portion of this to get a little more insight. So 5th line: they are consistent and steadfast, sincere in their divination, auspicious for the madam, ominous for the master. In a heart-mind dichotomy, follow your heart and question the mind. Fuzi is a Confucian honorific used to address someone elderly, reputed to be wise or of notable scholarship, or a master teacher. Fu Ren, or madam, is the Confucian honorific used to address a married woman. A modernized interpretation of the 5th line is to view it as the relationship between logic and intuition. follow your intuition, the madam, and be wary of where your logic, the master, is leading you. In reading that, I'm thinking about all the things that I just said in this particular video, and it's sort of like in trying to communicate what I'm feeling, I'm earing away from what I'm actually trying to say, or what it is that I feel and know is being contradicted by what I'm saying. You know, the minute you try to describe the truth, it isn't the truth. You know, the truth can't be described. The traditional interpretation would have been more direct, patriarchal, and literal. A wife has been living up to her duties, but a husband has not been living up to his, though acknowledging that both are devoted and sincere. The fifth line can also be interpreted through the lens of the other Confucian relations. Thus, beyond the literal reference to husband and wife, the oracle is siding with the subjects and against a sovereign ruler. The madam can also be interpreted as the younger generation and a more progressive movement, with the master as an older generation and a conservative movement. The madam would be interpreted as left wing and the master as right wing. This can also relate to a parent-child relation boding well for the child and not boding well for the patient, or for the parent. That was patient. Interesting. The only reason that's standing out to me is because I am in the medical field, so the fact that patient came through for parent, I'm like, what does that mean? I also think it's interesting that there's like political discourse happening with this particular line, you know, with the left wing and the right wing, because even as I was reading auspicious for the madam, ominous for the master, I'm not going to get into American politics, but I think that kind of speaks for itself. Unfortunately, like, I'm of the mind where I'm kind of like, I don't want to get into it. Politics is just a source of constant frustration. Sixth line, swaying, wavering endurance, setbacks, and hardship. Formulate a long-term path and then commit to it. Cultivate your endurance. The ability to bear pain and hardships determines likelihood of success, which, again, this theme of endurance and kind of what I was talking about, like Mars needing to have the energy disciplined and stretched out to endure over long stretches of time in order to follow something through to completion. So if the moon is like approaching Mars like it was in the sky and is now, kind of intimating like a period of time where there's struggle and hardship and conflict and aggression and violence even, there needs to be discipline in order to endure through those periods of time, like very carefully crafted awareness of one's surroundings within a battlefield, and a very clear method of delineating one's priorities for survival, for endurance. What is it that's actually valuable and important when you're in a time of crisis and you're in a time of difficulty? I feel like a lot of the things that we value now within, you know, our cushy Western countries will immediately be usurped by more fundamental survival-based needs if something of that nature would ever kind of take place. And in some sense, that's probably could be a catalyst for positive development within the Western psyche, because I feel like in a lot of ways we've kind of divorced ourselves from what humanity actually is or ought to be. Even saying that's kind of dangerous territory, because I don't want to be like a idealist or a utopic type person. I feel like those sorts of ideologies can be very dangerous, as we've seen historically. So whatever it is that we can be moving towards, and what we probably are moving towards, I think is beyond our present ability to conceptualize. And so we're trying to compare it to the old systems, which I think maybe is why we're seeing a lot of the rise of more like communist, socialist, even tyrannical type governmental systems. But it's almost like a reactionary, it's almost reactionary to the complete shift in the human psyche that's taking place right now. You know, and obviously I'm hopeful that the outcome, bears more benefit in the long term for the collective than I am in a future where the opposite is the case. But we're don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, I have ideas of what might happen, like we all do, but all we can really do is to cultivate our endurance, like this hexagram is saying. The ability to bear pain and hardships determines likelihood of success. Your restlessness and state of anxiety are what prevent you from succeeding. You exhaust yourself through unproductive movement. Perseverance must have a direction. Expending energy without a direction is mere waste. Those 3 lines, thinking about how angry I felt looking at this man smoking his pipe, and all that anxiety and fear, it was almost like it was impinging my ability to think clearly and my ability to make decisions and to rationalize even what I was seeing in the sky, to like try to figure out. I'm usually relatively good at delineating in my head astronomical placements and relation of where particular stars should be at any particular point in time in the day or the night or in the month, the year, that whole thing. But in that state, I was so anxious that I was looking at the sky and I had no idea what I was looking at. And I feel like that's kind of what is being communicated by these lines here, because with all the things that are happening globally right now, and with all the frustrations, with all the misdirected leadership, to put it lightly, there is a tendency for us to want to be, very much in our feelings about things, very angry, very violent, very irrational, really. But I think the medicine, the long-term medicine, what will get us through to a better future, whatever that means, is going to be in the cultivation of a very careful, responsible approach. Rather than just immediately expressing how we feel about something, getting really worked up about every little thing or any big thing, and taking a stance and saying, this is the hill I'm going to die on. I don't think that is necessarily helping anyone. Obviously, stand up in times of, where survival is a necessity rather than a luxury. Just think very carefully before you identify with any particular response or reaction to a situation. Think about the long term. Don't get caught up in the short term small details. Like right now, kind of what I didn't get into with the whole political aspect of things is like it's basically like a play happening on a stage to me. I don't care. Not that I don't care, that's not quite correct either. It feels like the dying performance of old actors that have no relevance in the new century, kind of to connect it to old colloquial terms. This new paradigm that we're shifting into, it's like the shape of it doesn't allow any room for the form of the empire that's still being played on the world stage, both in my more local American politics, but also in the systems of governance around the world. Our old methods of doing things, it's not working anymore, and it's not going to work in the future. So I think right now we're all in this process of seeing everything that's wrong, seeing everything that isn't working, seeing all the forms of leadership that we don't value, that aren't conducive for progress, aren't conducive for compassionate growth and sustenance of the human species, the earth, global consciousness as a whole, including all the different beings that we share the planet with. We're seeing all of this so that we can delineate and create the response to it? What has better implications in the long term? And by long term, I mean like measuring things in centuries, in millennia even. Because right now, everything is like balancing on the tip of a needle point, is what it feels like. And I think we all know this. And so this awareness of being at this position is causing a lot of us to try to figure out what is it that actually works and endures through the passage of time, which is why a lot of us are connecting with like old traditional methods of doing things with regards to like handicrafts, cooking, growing food, even like returning to more analog methods of creating things like with writing and drawing on like actual pieces of paper with pens rather than typing, using typewriters. Like this whole resurgence of the old within this new paradigm is like a way or a manifestation of our collective processing of what will endure in the long term. What has the strength to remain in the face of a complete collapse? Like if everything were to just collapse right now, societally, like what is it that's in place now that will remain in place even through this process? It's like, that's dangerous thinking though. Even in saying this, I'm probably putting myself in a position that's more vulnerable, because the old paradigm of power relies upon the sense of the individual that they are incapable of making necessary decisions, that they need to defer the responsibility of the hard decisions that affect, larger communities of people, at every scale, that this needs to be given to somebody else who is more capable, who is smarter, who has more knowledge or experience. And obviously that has a place, but I think the new paradigm that we're moving into is a return to individual sovereignty, is a return to the emphasis of the educated human. We have so much information available to us at this point. It's almost a choice for a lot of us to remain in a state of ignorance because of how much information is so freely available. And there's a lot more complexity in the whole system than my oversimplification of things like that. But I think what we're moving towards is the return of the educated human spirit. If everyone understands the fundamental mechanics of reality at every scale, astronomy, language, history, culture, spirituality, and trying to like delineate what spirituality actually is, and not necessarily the religious constructions that have been like overlaid on top of them as a way of sort of gatekeeping, which, I was having a discussion with a friend of mine recently about this. I don't want to get into it so much here today because I'll just keep rambling for another hour or several hours. But, this notion that we're moving into a world where people need to be educated, people need to be informed, and people need to take responsibility not only for themselves but for the people around them. Like, we are responsible for those hard decisions. We shouldn't be thrusting everything onto this one particular person just because they know how to identity politic. Like, they have a charisma, so therefore they must be able to make all the decisions in my benefit and also in the benefit of all these other people that are around me, relying on the signatures that this person signs on a piece of paper. Like, no, this is not the world that we need anymore. We didn't need it before, but I mean, in some sense, I guess we did, because it's what has propelled us towards the state of coming to realize that, hey, this isn't the correct way to do things, so what is? Okay, hopefully all that made sense. That was kind of like a spiral of rabbit holes and tangents. We're going to move on to the tarot portion of this reading and see what comes through, and then I'm gonna have to go and use the restroom because I've had a lot of water today as I drink more. Drink your water, kids, and know where your water's coming from. Okay. I'm seeing a Chihuahua for some reason. I'm trying to figure out what that means. You know, the Chihuahua is similar to the Aztec dog, or it might even be related to it. I forget the name of it. I want to say Xolochi? Xolochichi? I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've seen the name of that dog, but it's associated with one of the principles or one of the gods. I feel like the Aztec spirituality is a little bit more nuanced than just being this polytheistic, thing that the West has understood it to be. I think fundamentally the idea of Teot is more like a universal archetype or principle that's been anthropomorphized as a way of conceptualizing and understanding something that is fundamentally beyond the notions of conceptualization. They're like different fragments or expressions of the same ultimate light. Like it's an attempt to define a single ray of the sun. But anyway, there is a Teot. I can't remember the name of this particular deity, but I believe he is expressed as being a human with the head of a Xolo, the dog, the Aztec dog, and is acting as a, what's the word I'm looking for? A psychopomp? Kind of like that mercurial figure that bridges the living with the dead and sort of guides souls through the underworld. I'm wondering if maybe that's the imagery that's being communicated in my seeing of this Chihuahua. You know, specifically it was a Chihuahua with its tongue hanging out like a little old man Chihuahua, so kind of this idea of maybe decay, but there being sort of like a childlike innocence in the process. It's super cute. I love Chihuahuas. I'm biased though. I'm also seeing like a face mask. Like kind of like those, like what you'd see in the old cartoons or the old movies when somebody was a criminal, like wearing the white and black striped shirt, and then they have like the black little face mask or eye mask, and like little holes cut out for their eyes. Not sure what that means. Maybe some element of stealth is being communicated. And I'm feeling the urge to like connect back to what I was saying, like rather than reacting and immediately expressing how you feel about a particular circumstance, maybe keeping that to yourself. Don't tell people how you feel about certain things, because as we've seen historically, in times of crisis, where it seems like it's one side against another side, anybody who expresses dissent against the majority is usually in a lot of trouble. You know, we've seen them carted off to camps and prisons. So maybe this is kind of like an element of that. And of course, in saying that, I'm potentially signing myself up for similar treatment in the future if something that terrible ever did come to pass, which I really hope it never does. But I don't know the future. can only connect with the impressions that I get of it, and connect with the messages that the unseen world attempts to communicate to us in the process of time unfolding. Okay, I feel like I want to keep shuffling. Like there's more shifting that needs to happen before the cards are ready to be laid out on the table. And if you've made it this far in the reading, thank you for your patience. This is kind of a more unorthodox sort of reading, even for my standards. I'm not hugely attached to consistency with my readings, but this reading is definitely a little out there in comparison to the others. So thanks if you've made it this far and you're sticking with me and you've been able to follow my ramblings. I think that's it. Okay, first card's going to be reversed. Might be interesting. We'll get to that bottom of the deck card. Okay, so first card, we have the Princess of Wands, and of course she's in reverse. And I'm looking over at this pedestal here with the fire on it, and I'm thinking about the Vedic fire rituals. What is called the Homa now. There was another older name for them, but essentially it was like a place for physical offerings to be presented to the fire, the sacred fire. And this came up in another reading a few days ago. I don't really remember which one specifically. If you watched that one, remind me which one it was. But this idea of fire catalyzing this alchemical transformation of gross physical matter into something subtle, vaporous, if you will, something that's more diffuse and pervasive and more readily accessible with the higher planes of existence, with the gods. So that's interesting. That's my fixation with the card today. 10 of Cups in reverse. This is called Satiety in this deck. That's the last decan of Pisces. Sort of like the linear culmination of the zodiac. The Empress in reverse again. She keeps coming through in reverse lately. And every time she does, I think of her as she is now, the evening star. I'm trying to see if there's anything that's prickling my attention. And actually, I'm looking at her waist. I'm looking at that hand. And in reverse, from my perspective, looking at the card through the camera like this, it almost looks like she's pregnant, which makes sense with the Empress, of course. It's like something about that is relevant, and it's bringing my attention back to Punarvasu and Aditi, the mother of the gods. I wonder if that's kind of what's being connected with here. And we have the Strength card, which is lust in this deck. Leo. I always think it's weird how she's like cupping a uvula, or what appears to be a uvula. I guess that's kind of erotically relevant considering the imagery and the name of the card. And Crowley, of course. Queen of Cups. Which is, I feel like, kind of like the position that I'm taking with this particular reading. Looking into the black mirror and giving words, giving form to the images and the impressions. The High Priestess in reverse. She's going under the Princess of Wands. The detail that I'm getting fixated on with these two cards right now is sort of like the fabric, the matrix of space, the continuum. It's like a blanket or a sheet, a membrane. And a lot of my psychedelic experiences, I've always had this sensation of like sort of coming through a membrane or into a womb or out of the womb in some sense. Like there's this membranous quality to the manifest universe, and it makes sense that a lot of more traditional ideas of what the goddess is the manifestation of the outer world that sort of entombs or enwombs the conscious being, which is more associated with like the god. But it's like they're not separate. So something about that is coming through with these two cards, this membranous quality, this goddess archetype. I mean, the goddess is coming through with a lot of the readings lately, but here she is at the crown as the Empress. Still have more cards to get on the table, so let me not get too sidetracked with this. We have Libra coming through in reverse, adjustment. This is coming through underneath the Ten of Cups and right next to the High Priestess or the Priestess. What I'm connecting with looking at this card right now, I'm thinking about the man that was, sitting there smoking his pipe, watching everybody. And like this notion of like him having been the one that pulled the levers that sent these capsules full of people on their way. There's an idea of like injustice, which just makes a little bit of sense with the fact that the card is in reverse. Like it's like a twisted or a inverted sense of justice. It's justice by maybe this pipe smoking man's terms. And this is no offense to anybody that smokes pipe. I do occasionally, and it is nice. So I don't think that reflects poorly on your character if you do smoke the pipe. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, like this person, this figure, this leader, or this robber baron, which is another archetype that's coming up in the consciousness lately. Like they have a different sense of what's right and wrong because it's more aligned with their own vision of the world and has nothing to do with how things play out for the commoners, so to speak. And I'm seeing the commoners as I'm looking at this Ten of Cups in reverse. Like these are the capsules that are full of people that are being thrust into the underbelly of the earth, into the sewage lines, into the underwater or underground caves where the rivers drain, where the ocean drains and carves out these chasms. And this isn't the first time that I've had a dream that kind of runs along the similar theme of like vessels full of people being shoved or forced underground into like these weird caves with winding rivers in them, sewers, whatever. But it's like, it's interesting imagery. Every time it comes through, I'm always just like, what is this? Why is it coming through like this? Anyway, 10 of Coins, wealth. That's the last decan of Virgo. That's going right under the Empress and right next to adjustment. I have thoughts, but let's get more cards. Hanged Man. This to me is like Pisces a little bit, but I think fundamentally a little bit more complicated, more encompassing. That's going right next to the 10 of Coins and underneath Lust, or the Strength card. And then we have the 3 of Wands, Virtue, which is interesting because as I was saying that it was between the 10 of Coins and underneath the Lust card, the Hanged Man being kind of like a suspension of impulse, a suspension of baseline mundane consciousness in favor of kind of withdrawing and taking a more spiritual perspective of things, turning the world on its head so that you can better understand it from a different perspective that's removed from your immediate day-to-day impressions of things. And it was like with the lust card right above it, I was thinking about, okay, so like controlling the impulse to be reactionary to certain situations, like I was saying, to immediately speak out against or in favor of a particular thing at any particular moment, and identifying very heavily with the ins and outs of the play that's happening on the world stage, and getting very invested in that. And it's like the Hanged Man is like the opposite of that, like withdrawing from that and trying to see the larger picture, trying to see it from a different angle to better understand it. And then it was like virtue came out as I was thinking about these things. That's the middle decan of Aries, but it's like this is the sun's decan in Aries, where the sun is exalted and more readily associated with its free expression of its highest quality. The sun being the light of the soul, the self, and through Aries is kind of unimpeded in shining and providing vitality and life and color and light to the world. That's invigorating and uplifting and empowering and strengthening. But it's like, it's noble, it's dignified, it's not dammed up and fragmented and broken up and made muddy and dirty. It's like, it's pure, uninhibited expression. And that's what virtue is. It's like that pure expression of the soul, of light. And by withdrawing from this outer play, this reactionary, impulsive, urge-driven, desire-driven, passion-driven, emotion-driven experience of reality, by consciously, deliberately stepping away from that, you're able to come into the pure expression of the soul. You're able to experience God, Goddess, whatever you want to call it, Jesus. You're able to experience that truth within. And that fundamentally, I think, is what is going to guide the next manifestation of human society. Because up until this point, we've been toying with lesser manifestations of our capabilities. We've been holding ourselves to lower standards collectively. This is something that I've talked about in a few of my readings before. I get a little impatient with myself, and of course I get impatient with other people, in the sense that it feels like we're not doing enough to better ourselves. Not doing enough to better educate ourselves, to know more about the world. And I know there's a lot of us that are certainly trying, and of course I commend that, but it's like, ever since I was a little kid, I've always had this notion of like a pole star. I have North Node right on Spica, so there's like this this striving for perfection. And of course, like I was saying, that's dangerous. It creates ideologies, utopic ideologies, that end up being very destructive in the longer term. But it's like there's an element, or a need for an element of this that's guiding this progression into a better world, a more sustainable world. And when I say sustainable, I'm not saying it necessarily in the sense of like environmentally sustainable. Of course, that's an aspect of it, but I mean in like the sustenance, the endurance of human culture, of human knowledge, of human passion and love for experience and for each other, an appreciation for one another. We have these massive stone constructions of human civilizations from ages that we can't even conceive of. But they're still here because I think on some level they had tapped into some aspect of what it is that we're beginning to connect to now. This enduring consciousness, plans measured in centuries rather than in months or a couple of years, decades maybe. You know, it's a wider vision of the world and not so narrowly focused. And I'm saying that and looking at this 10 of coins, like this highest expression of physicality, this highest expression of material manifestation. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about like the old Victorian stonemasons and woodworkers and the incredible, beautiful, structurally sound buildings and houses that they would make, you know, at the turn of the 1800s, 1900s. You know, a lot of those buildings still remain today, and they embody a level of craftsmanship that we can't even parallel now, because of the level of attention to detail and material was there. You know, a level of that was there that we don't we don't have today. Like, we have a very disposable, short-sighted view of things. We don't have an appreciation for aesthetics in nearly the same way that we did then, which I think is culturally a tremendous loss and has contributed to a lot of the more nihilistic, black-pilled mentalities that a lot of people have, because there's nothing beautiful in our society. There's no... You know, we slap an onion or a banana peel on the wall and we're like, this is high art. There's a toilet in the middle of the room. This is high art. You know, like, there's those videos that are going around of people taking their shoes off in modern art museums and setting them in the middle of the room. And you have people walking up and looking at the shoe and trying to figure out, wow, this is art. What does it mean? What is it standing for? And you have this person that took their shoe off standing off in the corner recording these people and making fun of them because the whole notion is ridiculous. You know, there's no value in anything that we create anymore because we're not present with the process, and we're so short-sighted and so focused on what's happening in our day-to-day experience and our, daily sways of emotion and our identification with certain bits of information or certain paradigms of thought. Like, everything is so small, and that's not how we get forward. That's not how we move forward. We need to think bigger, broader. Trying to see which card wants to say something next. Which one is going to spark the next? I'm looking at this Queen of Cups now, and specifically what I'm looking at is the heron, however you want to say it. Where I live on the coast, it's very common to see these birds. And they're really fascinating. Like, they'll stand there in the same position for very long periods of time, not really moving, just kind of observing their surroundings and taking things in. And then once they do start to move, there's like a very deliberate and careful process, and they're very aware of their surroundings, but they're still moving very slowly, very methodically. It's like they're the most beautiful representation of what Saturn feels to me to be. And I have a friend who actually calls them the slow-moving man, or the slow old man, the slow-moving old man, something, that sort of idea. And it's like, yes, this is the concept of endurance that the hexagram was talking about, and that I've been talking about with Mars, and the highest expression being in Capricorn, and this need to stretch and discipline the volatile, passionate energy out into something that is far-sighted, that sees things through to completion and measures plans not in moments but in centuries, which is kind of connecting with some of Frank Herbert's writings, but we won't get into that so much. I'm looking over at the bottom of the deck, and of course we have the Five of Cups, which is called Disappointment. This is the first decan of Scorpio. But it was kind of, to me, it's connecting to what I was saying earlier about, how do I put this? I'm trying to remember how I worded it exactly. It was something like, the world is sort of putting on display all the dysfunction, all the poor leadership, all the things that aren't working, in order for us to alchemize them and come up with solutions to them. And I say alchemize because you have kind of like these almost alembic like copper wires or copper pipes. They're actually like the stems of the lily pads, but I feel like in my head it's the image of like the little, I don't even remember what you call them, the pipes on a distillation system, that are often coiled up and allow the vapors to condense and cool and become, the essential oils or whatever it is that you're distilling out of raw plant matter. It's like this dysfunction and broken systems, all of that is like being thrown into this alembic and boiled away and distilled into something else. Finding purpose in everything that's going wrong now, because all of it is informing a process of creation that will improve things in the future. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about the situation that took place in the Appalachian Mountains after Hurricane Helene. There were whole towns that were just like wiped off the face of the earth, or rather wiped underneath the earth with the mud flows and everything. So many lives just completely erased. And it's like, as I'm talking about like this process of, these terrible things coming up in our consciousness, as being like a catalyst for an alchemization process of creating something better. Like, I don't know how that's going to look for those people. I don't know how that's going to look for people in war-torn areas. The breakdown is tremendously difficult. It requires tremendous endurance, kind of like what this hexagram was saying, and kind of like what Mars is intimating. This isn't for the faint of heart, and I think a lot of what's already happening is sort of like a culling process. Like when you plant a bunch of seeds and you have really strong, vibrant plants that start to sprout before all the other ones, and they grow tall and they grow wide, and then you have the kind of stragglers at the bottom. Like, this is a terrible way of thinking about humanity, of course, because it's kind of along the lines of like eugenics and stuff, but a lot of situations will show the people that are stronger and more able to endure and prosper in times of adversity than those who might squander the opportunity, not know what to do. But this is like an opportunity to rise to the occasion, to develop that strength, because even the weak, I feel, can become strong as long as they apply themselves and as long as they try. And I think that's what a lot of these situations are imposing upon us. It's like the old way is to sit back and let somebody else make the decision for you so that you don't have to make the decision. But if you want to move into the next world, you need to take that responsibility yourself. I said once in a post of mine, I think sometime last year, in terms of the notion of sin, I think the only sin in the world is deferred responsibility. Putting the responsibility on some messianic figure to come and fix all the problems that you don't want to deal with yourself. And that's not to diminish anybody who believes in a Messiah of some kind that's coming. Like, there's an aspect of my own self, like I'm obviously a very spiritual person. I believe in God, and I believe in spirit, and I've had enough experiences in my life to confirm that, you know, this universe, this reality, this life isn't just like a string of empty coincidences like, you know, the Western scientific paradigm likes to peddle. But I'm skeptical of man-made constructions that compel one to believe that you yourself don't have the power and you need to bow to someone else. You need to believe in a different figure who's going to fix the problems because you can't. And of course, no human being is perfect. So no human being is, at least in our present expression of humanity, able to fix all the problems, so to speak. So I mean, there's a token of realism in that notion of understanding that you don't have control over everything and you can't fix everything. It's kind of just like a fact of being alive. But what I'm getting at is that there's a certain dangerous quality to wanting to constantly give up your problems to somebody else to fix them for you, and whether that's an actual person in your life or it's, you know, figureheaded by a religious figure, a spiritual figure. You know, Source is ever compassionate, of course, and when you pray, you know, you can change things profoundly in your life. There's power there, of course. But be proactive and take responsibility yourself. Do what is within your control. And approach what is not in your control with an element of flexibility. Adjust yourself as necessary. I'm looking at adjustment as I'm saying that. Be adaptable. Be flexible. Change your approach as needed in order to survive, in order to endure, in order to help build this new world, this better world. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say, but I feel like I've already said so much in this reading and probably turned away a lot of you in the process, so it is what it is. I don't have any expectations here, so if you made it this far, appreciate you devoting well over an hour of your time into listening to me doing whatever this was. And I wish you the best. And I hope that you will consider what I was speaking on about endurance and about being responsible and about being careful, being measured in your approach to everything right now, even though the natural inclination is to explode or react negatively, whatever that word means. React unproductively or destructively. You know, take a step back and think before you speak. Take a step back and think before you act. Just the air pressure shifting in the house. But with that, I wish you all the best. Thanks for sticking through.